Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Made for More podcast. Today we are still talking about the special report and the future of leadership in the age of AI. It's me, your host, Ally Nitschke, leadership strategist and someone who spends quite a lot of time in boardrooms, on stages and helping leaders navigate the complexity of modern workplaces and modern day leadership. Today, we are tackling one of the biggest shifts of our time, and that is hybrid and distributed work. If you have been living under a rock, then you probably have still heard about this while people have been lifting up the rocks. But the dust has well and truly settled since the pandemic. And yet, so many organizations are still grappling with the question, how do we make hybrid work? And here is the paradox. Employees want flexibility, leaders want connection, and the workplace of the future demands both. And I think there's a beautiful thing in this because in this episode, we're going to be unpacking what I call the hybrid paradox, how leaders can balance that flexibility and connection without falling into either the chaos or the rigidity. Now, if you know anything about me at all, if you've been listening to the podcast at all, you will know that there is no one size fits all when it comes to leadership. And I think the future of leadership and what we're going to be seeing in the future of leadership in the age of AI is there's not going to be one hybrid model fits all. It is going to be very much a custom design for the individual, not custom design for the team or custom design for the organization, but custom design for the individual. So where did the hybrid come from? To understand the challenge, we also need to really rewind and go back to where it all began. Now, during COVID, as we know, remote work was not a choice. It was a survival, and there were some people that adapted to it quite quickly, as in those organizations who were already set up from a tech perspective to be able to adapt. But what every single person had to do, and this is globally, is learned that productivity didn't fall off a cliff when people weren't in the office. And I think that was very much an interesting lesson and an interesting learning. In fact, for many, output stayed the same or even increased. Fast forward to today, and hybrids are no longer an experiment. It's actually the expectation. In fact, I would go so far as to say that the hybrid model and workplace flexibility would be at the top of employee benefits and what certainly our Gen Z are looking for when it comes to employment perks. Employees really want the best of both worlds. So the focus and the flexibility of remote work plus the connection and collaboration of in-person time. But here's the tension. When hybrid is left unmanaged or perhaps managed poorly, it can become really confusing. So there's some leaders demand people back in the office, others turn a blind eye. Employees end up with this mixed messages, and sometimes it can even differentiate from team to team, and it can be really confusing. So that inconsistency can start to breed resentment, and it really erodes trust. Trust with the leader, but also trust within the team as well, which is something we don't want. So the question isn't, should we do hybrid? I think the question is, how do we do it with clarity and courage? And when we think about the the hybrid paradox and the quadrant, this is where I like to introduce one of our simple models. So with the hybrid paradox quadrant, it is very much like a quadrant. So flexibility on one axis and connection on the other. And when we have workplaces or work arrangements, should I say, that have high flexibility but low connection, people are free but feel isolated. And what we tend to see is engagement dips and culture begins to erode. When we have low flexibility and high connection, people are present but they feel controlled. Attrition rises because autonomy is actually missing for the individuals. When we have low flexibility and low connection, as you can imagine, this is the worst of both worlds. There is rigid rules, disconnected teams, and productivity really crashes. With our high flexibility and high connection, this is the sweet spot. Teams feel trusted and connected. This is where engagement thrives and performance is sustainable. The challenge for leaders is this, that hybrid doesn't land naturally in that top right quadrant. It has to be designed, it has to be communicated, and it has to absolutely be led with intention. Some of the examples that I've seen recently is, I'll give you a few examples actually. So, one of the tech companies that I worked with were pretty quick to adapt to the hybrid model. They probably almost rushed to fully remote models, but within a year or so realized that the culture within the organization, within that business, was actually beginning to dissolve and becoming quite watered down. They swung back to a hybrid model, so introducing sort of a regular in-person anchor days for collaborating and trust building. But get this, it was actually individually led. So, what was your preferred cadence and how much did you want to connect with your team? This was a relatively small business. They probably had close to 100-ish people. So they were able to activate this quite quickly. Another one that I've worked with have gone, okay, for our professional services, a business that we have, we want to make sure that we are there to support our clients. And what they've done is introduced a crystal clear hybrid rhythm that works for everyone. So Mondays and Fridays are for remote focus work, and then Tuesdays through to Thursdays are for in-office collaboration and client meeting. So it's really setting those clear boundaries. But the kicker for this is they are upfront with that right from the recruitment process. So if that works for you, then that works for you. And if it doesn't, then have a conversation about it not working, and perhaps that's not the right place for them to work. And then one of the other industries that I work with is, education and government. And hybrid isn't always possible, particularly for all workforces. But even there, what we're seeing are ways for leaders to be able to give flexibility where it counts, and all of it comes down to communication. So, what are some of those asynchronous hours that could be worked, or compressed weeks, which we've heard about, but really tailoring it to the individual? And this is really a conversation of where, equality versus equity, and how do we make the best decision for the individual while also supporting the needs of the business. And I think the message here is that the hybrid isn't a one size fits all. What works in consulting would probably flop in healthcare. Let's hope that the healthcare is not all working remotely. And leaders really need to adapt a different mindset when it comes to going, what does work look like for the future in the age of AI, when we're not really sure what's working and what could work. And I think if we think back to the 9 to 5 structure, that's from the industrial revolution, and we're not in that space anymore. The way that we work is very much outdated. And if we're thinking about how do we keep people engaged, how we keep the connection and the creativity, really looking at the individual human is so, so important. So, one of the questions that I have been getting a lot lately is, what do leaders need to do differently? And hybrid isn't about managing locations, it's about managing clarity, connection, and culture. And here are some of the non-negotiables, I think, for leaders. First one is setting the rhythm. Hybrid needs structure without any cadence. People tend to drift. Leaders really need to create that drumbeat, the heartbeat, the weekly team check-ins, the monthly strategy resets, quarterly in-person events, and consistency builds trust. So figure out what your rhythm is, what your leadership cadence is, and stick to it unless you need to change it because it's not working. Number 2, my favorite one, as always, is communicate like crazy. When you think you've communicated, do it again. And when people are saying, oh gosh, here they go again, I've already heard this, you're probably finally getting some cut through. So in hybrid teams, silence can be really deadly. Over communicate the priorities, over communicate the expectations, over communicate the decisions, and if in doubt, share more, not less. Third one is all around measure connection, not just attendance. So in the white paper, I talked about this where we are looking at output over presence. But again, I think this is how connected are people versus how present are they? And stop counting tushies on seats and start measuring whether people feel seen, whether they feel valued, and whether they feel included wherever they are. This is really where your leadership style begins to show. Hybrid has exposed leaders who manage by presence, not by outcomes, and it rewards leaders who build trust, clarity, and accountability. Now, where I think the future of hybrid is going, and again, this can change at any moment because we know that AI is transforming workplaces, transforming the way that we work, transforming the world we live in very, very quickly. If you listen to last week's episode, I was talking about the augmentation wave that we're in, and it's between sort of now and 2035, or it could be now and 2030, depending on the rate of acceleration, which is just so unpredictable right now. But what does the future look like? So Gartner predicts by 2030 that up to 60% of knowledge workers will be in some kind of permanent hybrid arrangement. Now, it doesn't say that they are going to be uniformed hybrid arrangements, but it is going to be something that continues to exist. And the companies that thrive won't be the ones that are arguing over 3 days in, 2 days out, or 2 days in and 3 days out. They'll be the ones that are building the cultures of trust and rhythm. So, where flexibility actually fuels performance and connection fuels culture. So, again, thinking about last week's episode, I talked about how do we know what our objectives are when it comes to introducing AI. I think being really clear around what the objectives are for your workforce, for them to deliver on what their objectives are, what the expectations are, and then planning the work around that accordingly. So hybrid will evolve from being a policy to actually becoming a leadership competency. Just like strategy, just like coaching, just like accountability, leading hybrid will become a core part of every leader's toolkit. Now, if you are going, we don't have that leadership competency within our business, please flick me an email, ally@madeformore.com.au, and I'm happy to talk you through how we're really looking to build some of these AI and the future of leadership competencies within organizations so that they are hitting the ground running for 2026, but also so they don't get to 2030 and go, oh, gee, it would have been good if we'd done that a little bit earlier. There's that old saying that is the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the next best time is right now. And that is true for all of these competencies around AI and the future of leadership. The time to get crack-a-lacking on them is right now. So the question that I will leave you with is, where does your team sit in the hybrid paradox quadrant? Are they in that sweet spot where we've got the high flexibility and high connection? Or, is there something missing that you could perhaps add to the arrangement? Are you giving people flexibility but leaving them disconnected? Are you are you forcing connection at the cost of autonomy, which can be really detrimental? Or are you creating that beautiful spot where people feel trusted and connected? Because the truth is, hybrid doesn't manage itself. The leaders do. And if you are a leader, then you need to get serious about how you are creating that connection, creating that trust at that individual level. The ones who get this right, they aren't just going to be productive. And I'm talking about the teams here. The teams aren't just going to be productive. They're going to be energized, they're going to be engaged, and they're going to thrive in the future of work with creativity, with agility, adaptability, all the things that you really want to set your team up for success comes down to that trust and that connection. Anyway, thank you for tuning in today. I hope this has given you something to think about. If you want a copy of the quadrant, head on to the show notes and you'll be able to find it on the website there. If this sparked something for you, please share it with your friends, your colleagues, another leader who is wrestling with this hybrid paradox that we are in. And don't forget to check out my special report, The Future of Leadership in the Age of AI. You can get your free download in the link, in the show notes link. And again, jump onto the website and it'll pop up there for you. And this is really where I unpack that a little bit more.